Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Foster, aka Wonder Nerd on Twitter. Today, I'm here to tell you a little bit about the technical side of doing 3D graphics in the data center. Because this is a tech talk, it's going to be really short. So there are several resources that you'll actually have access to at the end of the slide deck here, and when I'm finished talking, that will get a whole lot deeper into that. And I will have a blog post up on my website shortly afterwards on how to go through and configure all of these 3D graphics. With that, let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of it. Most people, when we're talking about 3D graphics, are going to go, I want VSGA or VDGA. There is also Soft 3D, which is installed on the virtual machine itself and just uses the processor, RAM, and hardware of the physical server, the ESXi host that you have, as opposed to having a special graphics card in there. VSGA and VDGA both require specialized graphics cards. VSGA, you can actually start getting a varied selection of graphics cards now, including some from AMD and Intel, along with the Nvidia Grid technologies. VDGA, VMware only supports the Nvidia Grid cards currently for that technology. So you can't go out and get it from other vendors at this time. Stay tuned to VMware for more information on that. Here on the screen, you'll see a listing of comparisons between VSGA and VDGA. VSGA is shared graphics, whereas VDGA is dedicated graphics. And that's really the difference. What's happening there is VSGA is using the standard sharing mechanisms that we've all come to realize from VMware to share the graphics card. VDGA, we're literally passing that graphics card processor or GPU up to the virtual machine. When you're using VDGA, you don't get to use vMotion or any of the other movement technologies that you would with VSGA because that hardware is dedicated to the virtual machine. With that, let's get on to installing it. Most of my experience is with the Nvidia Grid cards, so that's where I'm going to focus it on. They are also the leader right now for GPU, so that's why we're focusing mostly on the Nvidia Grid. This may also apply to other technologies out there as well. So first, you got to stick the card in the server. Depending on your server, installation steps vary. The key highlights are that you have to have 2 PCI X 16 slots to hold the card. Nvidia Grid cards are passively cooled, so there's no fan on there. So they do generate a fair amount of heat. You'll want to take that into consideration when you're doing your server room. And the last part is they require an auxiliary power supply. So you'll need to talk to your specific hardware vendor to find out how they do that particular power supply. Here you can actually see a little breakdown of the Grid K1 and K2 cards on the bottom of the screen, and that gives you an idea on how much power, RAM, and everything else that's actually going on there, along with the connectors that are used for it. That said, we're going to start in with VSGA, which is probably going to be a little bit more common than VDGA. So when we're going through, once we've got the card in the server, we need to download the VSGA driver and install it on our ESXi host. You can get the driver from NVIDIA's website or whoever else's VGA or GPU card that you're going to use. Then you need to install the VIB. So 5.1 and 5.5 are a little bit different as VIB installation goes. Here we have the 5.1. Next slide, I'll actually show the 5.5 installation command. It's actually real simple, standard VIB install. You'll need to do this on each host that has a GPU installed in it. Then you will want to reboot or you want to restart the Xorg process. Without restarting it, your NVIDIA Grid SVGA is not going to work. So it's really important that you restart that. Also, the installation of the VIB will not work unless the host is in maintenance mode. So don't forget to stick it in maintenance mode and then go through and do the install of the VIB. 5.5, real similar, little bit different. You'll see that we have local CLI software VIB as opposed to the ESX CLI command that we were using before. Again, we need to reboot. And if we don't want to reboot, we can do the kill of the VMK dev manager. And that'll take care of restarting it as well. Either way is up to you, but both are listed here so that you guys know where to go and find that. Few quick commands now that we have the card installed and the drivers installed on the ESXi host before we actually hop over to our VM and get that running. Etsy Xorg status. The Xorg status is actually going to sit there and give us the status of the Xorg process, which is really important, and it's used quite a bit with the grid cards and 3D graphics. So we want to make sure that that's in a running state. If it's not in a running state, we can use the Xorg start or Xorg restart. GPU VM is going to give you some stats about the virtual machine or give you some stats about the GPU and let you know whether the driver's installed properly and running. So again, a lot of good information there. And then my favorite tool, which is specific to NVIDIA, is the NVIDIA SMI. And you can actually see a screenshot of it here on the screen. It gives you status on the running state of the GPU. So you can see how much GPU memory usage is being used and several other really important statistics about your grid cards in there, which is really beneficial when you have people going, it's not working, I'm not getting the performance I expected. So my favorite thing to go troubleshoot performance issues inside of the GPU currently. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and get everything ready inside of our virtual machine. And I do apologize for not having screenshots. My lab's not fully up and running right now. So this is on the VDGA side. Once we've got the card installed, we want to enable pass-through for the GPU. Because remember, with VDGA, we're passing the card straight through to the virtual machine. Once we've got the card installed and it's getting booted back up, we want to go into our BIOS and make sure that the VT-D processor commands checked or the AMD IO-MMU is set. Both of those are required to take advantage of the graphics capabilities that you get with virtualizing GPUs, whether it's VDGA or otherwise. And it's also important to note that your virtual machine needs to be at hardware version 9 or hardware version 10, depending on which version of the hypervisor you're running. I recommend hardware version 10. There are some really neat features in there that I don't have time to get into that you can take advantage of in hardware version 10. Once that's done, once the BIOS is set, we can go ahead and power up the machine. Then we need to go in and edit our virtual machine. So we got to edit the VMX host file if that virtual machine has more than 2 gigs of RAM. We have to set a PCI hole setting on it to make sure that everything's running correctly. Otherwise, we're going to run into some graphics issues when we start running past that hole mark. Once that's done, we're going to edit the virtual machine, and you can either do this in the VMX file if you like working in the VMX file, or you can just go through and do it inside the configuration of the virtual machine. We're basically going to add the PCI device in as a pass-through device and plug that straight into the virtual machine. That way it passes through. Power up our virtual machine. We want to make sure the view agent is installed, and then we want to make sure the NVIDIA driver is installed. These may or may not prompt for a reboot. Typically they do prompt for reboots, but if they don't, make sure you reboot it. Otherwise you're going to get really funny results when you go through and finish off the rest of the testing and everything. Last part is to enable the NVIDIA capture settings. And the NVIDIA capture settings basically make sure that the 3D graphics driver's the part that's being used as opposed to the regular display driver. So definitely an important step to use. Otherwise, you'll sit there and go, oh, you're using the latest and greatest, and you'll not actually be taking advantage of it. And then the last and most important part of the process is you want to connect full screen via PC over IP connection to the desktop for the first time to make sure that it actually applies. If you connect to the desktop any other point in time without doing this first, it's not going to allow your 3D graphics card to function correctly, and again, you won't have the processing going on. So you've got to do that connection. Otherwise, it doesn't render right, and you'll actually get artifacts and stuff inside your 3D graphics because of it. Once you've connected to it, you're going to run the DX diag on the virtual machine, and that's going to confirm that everything is configured correctly. It's going to basically come back saying, yes, the driver is installed, yes, I'm talking to the graphics card, and you're good to go. That's all there is to the VDGA installation. So now we'll get to the endpoints. Everybody thinks, oh, it's just about the graphics card. That's not entirely true. You've also got to take into consideration your endpoints. A typical 3D graphics session at peak can run 70 megabits a second for a load. So this can be very, very intensive on the network. So you got to make sure you have the bandwidth there. You've got to make sure your client can handle that bandwidth coming into it, which I know sounds odd, but you want to make sure of it. Typically, what's recommended is the new Terra 2 Zero clients to make sure you have the processing power, or the i3, i5, or i7 series processors for PC-based or thin client-based systems. That way they have the horsepower as well to handle and decode all of the PC over IP commands coming in. Low-end systems, older thin clients, may not actually have that processing power, and they just fall over on themselves. So really want to make sure you're using a current thin client, zero client, or laptop. That pretty well wraps it up for me. Bring up my references here. First one is to VMware's website. Awesome paper on configuring and setting up 3D graphics. You'll want to check that one out before you go through and start doing any projects. A lot of the information in this tech talk came from there. NVIDIA's website for the grid, hit that up as well. That's where you're going to find your drivers. That's where you're going to find everything else. And then I have a blog post already on Soft3D that you can check out. A lot of that gets into the configuration of the actual desktop and pools. If you have questions, hit me up on Twitter or send an email to tony.foster@wondernerd.net, or you can hit up my website. Thank you, everybody.